Hello friends and neighbors. Well, after some delay, it's time to get back to the Ultimate Recommendation Book Club. We have looked at the first half of The Book Thief, so now, let's start on the second half. Today we look at Part 6, 7, and 8. Part 6 is entering into one of the bloodiest years of World War II, 1942. As such, death becomes more of a presence, so we get things from his perspective, we learn a little bit more about him and what he does and how he views things. And there comes a point in this section where death actually crosses over into the story, and not in one of the 3 times that he mentioned in the prologue. Because in this section of the story, Max, the Jew that the Hubermans are harboring, becomes sick. So sick, in fact, that he basically falls into a coma and has to be moved upstairs. This has, of course, a profound impact on Liesl for a number of reasons. First of all, she and Max have formed a very strong friendship, of course, but also she is at least partially responsible for him getting ill. At the beginning of the section, she decides to bring a little bit of the snow that has fallen outside inside to Max so that they can build a snowman in the basement. It's whimsical and fun, and of course Max loves it, but he gets sick because they brought snow inside. This is also a trying time for the Hubermans because now they're faced with the possibility that Max could die. And if he dies, of course it will be very sad because they formed a friendship with him, but also it would be very problematic for them because what are they going to do with the body? The book in question for Part 6 is called The Dream Carrier, which is nice for this section because while Max is sick, Liesl leaves him 13 gifts. And they're just little things that have stories associated with them that Liesl shares with Max while he is in his coma. And so she is, in effect, carrying these stories and these dreams to him. But the Dream Carrier also has significance in another way. While Max is sick, Liesl figures that one of the best ways to maybe help him is to read to him. At this point, she's still reading The Whistler, the book from Part 5, and so she finishes reading that to him, but then she needs something else to read to him. And none of the books that she has at this point really seem appropriate, and so she decides she's going to go to the mayor's wife's library and steal another book to read. The Dream Carrier is the 4th book that Liesl steals, and it's the first book that she steals with the actual intention of reading it. She stole the Gravedigger's Handbook for a keepsake, she stole the Shoulder Shrug as an act of rebellion, and they were both very spur-of-the-moment things. The stealing of the Whistler was premeditated, but she stole it again as an act of rebellion against the mayor's wife, and it was a book that she had already started reading. But this time, she goes to the mayor's wife's library, she says, I need a book to read, I'm gonna go steal one. And that's exactly what she does. We also see 2 significant things happening with Liesl's relationship with words. And they're both related because they both relate to the healing power that words can have and the healing power that they have with Liesl using them. First of all, we see her writing words. We saw her using words to describe things before, but now she is actually writing them down to present to Max when he wakes up. And second, of course, she is reading aloud to Max, which is going to factor very heavily into the remaining sections of the book. And like I said before, Death enters the house at this point. He is coming for Max, but Max fights him off, as Max has a tendency to do. And because the story is so death-centric in a lot of ways, this kind of serves as another turning point for the book, because we already know that the book is going to end badly. We know that it's going to end in death, and specifically the death of Rudy, but we also know at this point that the story is going to progressively get darker. So now let's move on to Part 7. The book associated with Part 7 is the dictionary. And here's why this is really cool. Obviously the dictionary is not telling a story, it's the dictionary. It's just a collection of words. But on the other hand, it's a collection of words. It's basically the words in their raw form that Liesl can use to shape to her own ends. And one of the points that is made in this section is that even though the dictionary defines these words, it doesn't necessarily define exactly what they can mean to us. Like, it gives the accepted definition, but the word happiness or the word peace or the word can mean something very different. So why the dictionary? How does this represent Liesl's life at this point? Well, in this section of the story, Liesl goes through a lot of changes and a lot of turning points. This is a really, really important chapter for Liesl's development in a lot of ways. And so the dictionary kind of makes perfect sense because it's like Liesl is feeling all the emotions. There are 8 words from the dictionary that are specifically defined throughout this section, so let's go through all 8 of them and see kind of what they represent in the story. Word number 1 is happiness, and this is the beginning of the section when things are going pretty well. Max has woken up, they're all feeling very happy. This is a high point in Liesl's life. And this is the first of 3 instances in which we see older Liesl, and this time we specifically get to read some of the words that older Liesl is writing about this time in her life. And it should be noted that one of the things that makes Liesl happy in this section is the stealing of another book. Not the stealing of the dictionary, but a stealing of the book that doesn't actually factor into the story like the 10 books that are the titles of the sections do. It's just one more book that she steals. It's not really significant, it's just a book that she steals for the heck of it, and it makes her happy. Word 2 is forgiveness, and this is the word that is used during the time when actually Liesl acquires the dictionary. Because basically the mayor's wife gives her the dictionary, because the mayor's wife is fully aware that she has been stealing books from her library, and she's totally okay with it. And you'll recall earlier in the novel that there has been a disconnect between Liesl and the mayor's wife, and this is the point when not only does Liesl forgive the mayor's wife for firing her mother, but the mayor's wife forgives Liesl for treating her so badly and stealing from her. They haven't had a reconciliation yet, that comes later. This is just the forgiveness aspect. Word number 3 is fear, and this is where we get into the first air raids in this story. Occasionally the Hubermans and Liesl have to go to a house down the street to wait in the basement for an air raid. These times of course are very stressful because who knows where the bombs are gonna fall, who knows if they're actually going to be safe in here, and everybody is really, really frightened. But the Hubermans and Liesl are frightened even more because, of course, Max can't come with them. So Max is trapped in the unsafe basement in their house, and if bombs fall, he could end up dying. The fourth word is word, which is also related to the air raids because this is when Liesl begins reading aloud during the air raids, first for herself, but then for everybody in the basement, and she helps to allay their fears. So again, we're seeing words as being comforting, as being a healing presence, and this of course will also factor into the fifth word, which is opportunity. This has to do with the neighbor who has a last name that I'm not going to try to pronounce, who keeps spitting on the Huberman's door. But she appreciates Liesl reading to them in the air raid shelter, and she wants Liesl to continue reading to her during the day, and so Liesl will go over and occasionally read to her, which kind of has a reconciliation between her and Rosa Huberman, but not really, but there's at least a peace between them. And Rosa gets something out of the deal too, which is the opportunity. Word number 6 is misery, which is where we get our first parade of the Jews. Periodically throughout the rest of the book, we will have Jews being marched through Himmel Street and through this small town on their way to concentration camps or death camps or whatever. And of course, it's always a miserable time, especially for the family who is harboring a Jew in their basement. And this is of course where Hans makes the grave mistake of showing kindness to one of the Jews, which puts him in danger, puts his family in danger, and most importantly, puts Max in danger. Max senses this danger and chooses to leave the Hubermans and Liesl and not put them through any more danger than he absolutely has to. He takes off for places new, and so this leads us to our seventh word, silence, the silence of his leaving. Older Liesl makes her other two appearances during the Parade of Jews and in this last section with word number 8, regret. Even though Hans did show kindness to one of the Jews, he regrets what he did because he knows that ultimately it didn't do a whole lot of good for anybody and it actually hurt him and his family and Max. Older Liesl looks back on this moment, wishes that she could have been more comforting to Hans, but was not able to find the words at that time. That's part 7, now on to part 8, Word Shaker. We've got two significant events happening in part 8. First of all, we have the iconic dominoes moment. The book cover is a row of dominoes about to be knocked over, and we get this scene at the very beginning of part 8 with Rudy and his siblings. The Nazis call upon the Steiner's household in order to take Rudy away to be part of an elite group of ideal Germans, but his parents refuse, and as a result, his father has to go in his place. But Rudy is faced at one point with a decision. He could either go out into the main room of the house and present himself to the Nazis, at which point they would have taken him away, or he can stay in the back room and play with the dominoes and pretend that he can't hear any of it that's going on. He chooses to stay behind, and that is ultimately why his father gets taken away. And as Death points out to us once again, had Rudy gotten taken away, he might have survived what happens at the end of the novel. So, dominoes. Related to the dominoes story, we also have Hans Huberman being called up to serve in the German army. And yes, it's probably as punishment for the help that he showed the one Jew, but regardless, he gets called up, he has to go away and serve, and as we already know from what Death told us, he is going to survive this war by some unusual means. But of course, Liesl and Rosa don't know that. They have to say goodbye, and during this sequence, first when he receives the letter that calls him up, and second when they're saying goodbye, these are the two appearances of older Liesl. And the second important thing that happens is that Liesl receives the Word Shaker, the series of drawings and stories that Max left her before he left. The Word Shaker is the name of the main short story that he wrote for her, and it's basically the entire philosophy of the book in the form of a fairy tale. It talks about the power of words that Liesl has already discovered, the power of words to hurt and to dominate the way that Hitler uses them, but also the power of words to heal and to comfort and to help the way that Liesl tries to use them. And this is kind of the point when Liesl starts to think, maybe I really can actively use words to help and to heal, and this is kind of planting the seeds for her writing her own story as she does in the final section. We also see Liesl fighting Hitler a lot more in this section, both with words and also with actions, as she and Rudy leave bread behind for another parade of Jews as they come through. And we also see the significance that each parade of Jews has for Liesl, because she of course is looking for Max in each one. But she won't find him until a later section, and this is where we're going to close off this section of the analysis today. If you have any other insights on parts 6, 7, and 8, please feel free to leave them in the comments or as a video response. And next time we'll be looking at the last few sections of the book Thief, parts 9 and 10, and the epilogue, and then after that, we'll move on to something else. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I'm still kind of deciding between a couple of choices, but I'll let you know that. And that's it for me. Until next time, happy reading.